Hey guys, welcome back. If you're wondering how to go from overlooked to in-demand entrepreneur, then stay tuned because I compiled 10 of my most actionable tips to help you make a difference and be recognized in your industry. Whether you're just starting out or looking to give your existing brand a boost, these tips are tailored for real-world impact. And make sure to watch till the end where I dive into a live coaching call with my client Jamie, who wants to better connect to her audience and increase her influence online. Let's start. Tip number 10, embrace who you are. The most powerful personal brands out there, they're not just about what you do or sell. They're also a transparent reflection of who you are. In fact, authenticity can become your brand's strongest asset. And for that, let's take a look at Pat Flynn, the founder of Smart Passive Income. Flynn began his online journey after being laid off from his architecture job. So instead of embellishing a persona of an always successful entrepreneur, he transparently shared his journey of starting from scratch. His monthly income reports, podcast episodes, and blog posts were not just about tactics or strategies. They were about his experiences, failures, and lessons. When you land on one of his pages, there's an inherent promise, authentic, tried and tested advice from someone who's been in the trenches. And Flynn, rooted in his self-awareness, consistently delivers on that. It's this genuine representation that has built him a community of loyal followers and fellow entrepreneurs. Which brings me to our next tip. Know and act according to your core values. So as the world gets more complicated, there's this huge desire in people to do the right thing. And this desire gets more and more transferred to brands. In fact, according to a 2018 study by Accenture, 63% of global consumers prefer to purchase from companies that resonate with their personal values and beliefs. But there's a fine line between standing for something and becoming what I call a brand chameleon. So a brand chameleon is someone who superficially aligns with a cause without genuine commitment. And so they shift colors trying to fit in, often losing their own identity along the process. I remember when I was just starting out, I was collaborating with a consultant who preached about protecting Mother Earth. And at one point, I remember we had to go and see a client and she would pick me up in a Porsche. I mean, the disconnect was just so jarring, not only for me, but also for the client we were working with. And don't get me wrong, this is not about showing up and being perfect all the time, but there needs to be an alignment with your message. Being a brand chameleon might bring you short-term attention, but people can smell when it's a front. And while we're at it, hit the like button if you value genuine brands over brand chameleons. So while we build our brands, we should always be honest and ask ourselves, is this something that I genuinely care about, or am I just maybe riding a wave here? All right, next is understand personality in personal branding. So another thing that I found that is a real game changer for a lot of people is realizing that personal branding isn't just about looking great online. You can have the most beautiful, most polished website and still fail to connect to your audience. And there's this tool that I like to use a lot in my work. It's this concept of brand archetypes. Brand archetypes or archetypes are personality patterns every one of us inherently knows and recognizes. They're rooted in Jungian psychology, and by understanding and leveraging your archetype, you can communicate with your audience on a much deeper level. But most importantly, especially when you're building your personal brand, these are not arbitrary. If you've been around the channel, you've probably heard me mention the similarity attraction paradigm. It's a principle that suggests that individuals naturally lean towards what's familiar and aligns with their core beliefs. So let's imagine for a moment that you are this leadership coach and you pride yourself on creative and dynamic group exercises. However, when you arrive at your client's site for a workshop, you're met with this restrictive classroom environment without any room for movement. This is when you can surely say that something's got lost in your message. Because especially when you're a one-man or a one-woman show, your goal is to attract clients who share or harmonize with your archetype. And of course, while we're at it, if you want to learn more about the concept of brand archetypes, there's a full playlist linked in this corner right here. And so the kicker is, when you choose to show up with intention, reflecting your brand archetype, you're not just gaining followers, you're attracting clients who actually resonate with your style. So the question you want to keep asking yourself here is, am I presenting myself in a way that attracts those who share my values and goals? Which brings me to our next tip. Live in your strength. One of the most transformative shifts you can make in your personal brand journey is to recognize that every perceived weakness can actually be a strength. And this is not about ignoring or denying those weak points. It's about reframing them in a way they can become part of your value proposition. And why is reframing so powerful? Because the story you tell yourself about your perceived weakness can either hold you back or push you ahead. The real opportunity lies in taking those weaknesses and using them to highlight the unique perspective and resilience you've gained. And for that, let's take a look at Marie Forleo. Marie openly speaks about being multi-passionate. Now, many might view jumping from interest to interest as a lack of focus, potentially even stemming from her ADHD. But rather than seeing this as a deficit, Marie reframes it and makes it part of her brand by coining the term multi-passionate entrepreneur. This reframing allowed her to bring a fresh, varied, and dynamic perspective to the world of marketing and online entrepreneurship, making her stand out in a crowded market. And this resonated with countless entrepreneurs who felt out of place in a world that often demands one singular focus. And so your journey might seem like it's filled with weak links, but with a little bit of reflection and creativity, you can turn these points into strengths. This is about owning every part of your narrative and turning vulnerabilities into compelling stories that attract the people who'll resonate with the real you. Okay, next is know and serve your audience. So now we talked about knowing yourself, but you also have to invest into knowing your audience. Most of us start by analyzing our audience's demographics, but what you really want to dive into is their psychographics. So this isn't only about knowing their age, location, or profession. It's delving deeper into their values, beliefs, aspirations, and desires. Imagine crafting content for millennials in New York. Knowing they're tech-savvy urbanites is kind of surface level. But when you understand that they value experiences over possessions, crave deep and meaningful connections, and are constantly seeking for ways to balance work and personal well-being, that's when you're playing a whole different game. And so the question is now, how can your brand become part in solving their challenges? And that brings me to our next tip. Be consistent. So while most people get really excited about starting their personal brand, it sometimes can become really tough to keep up the momentum. You see a gazillion platforms, endless content strategies, and it might seem tempting to be everywhere. But spreading yourself thin over all these platforms is a one-way ticket to Burnout City. Instead, and especially in the beginning, this is really about being on one or two platforms that really matter to your brand. And here's the kicker. Consistency isn't only about frequency, especially in the beginning when you're just figuring out the whole content game and you may not have as many resources at your hand. You want to firstly focus on consistently sharing a message that's rooted in your mission and that you believe in. And next is focus on quality, not quantity. There's this common misbelief that if you just produce more, work nonstop, and publish every day, you're doing things right. And while I believe it's a great idea to publish a lot at the beginning, especially to get over that perfectionist mindset, it's also good to pause once in a while and check if you're still adding value. So a while back, I was working with a nutritionist who created recipes to build an audience. And in her initial month, she created a new recipe every day to catch as many eyes as possible. But over time, she realized that while her recipe count went up, her follower count just didn't. So we decided to change tactics, and instead of daily posts, she began to craft one deeply researched and beautifully shot recipe per week, weaving in stories of her grandmother's kitchen or the history of a particular dish. And this is when people not only came back, but they also started to share her posts. So it was never about the sheer number of recipes. It was about the heart and soul she poured into each one of them. So your task is to find out what makes your content special and double down on that. Because a strong personal brand is not only about being seen, it's about being memorable. Which brings me to our next tip. Close the gap. Let me explain. Every successful entrepreneur out there started with a clear vision for themselves and their business. The key lies in bridging the gap between your present self and the person you aim to be, without prematurely presenting yourself as that future version. And I get it, in this digital age, we are bombarded with success stories with every scroll, swipe, and click, making it tempting to just slap on the mask and join the parade. But the true cost isn't just a potential tarnished reputation. It's the energy spent maintaining a facade. Energy better used to build an authentic and impactful business. So what's the alternative? James Clear said it best. Entrepreneurship is a personal growth engine disguised as a business pursuit. Remember those movies where the hero's struggles made us root for them? It's these journeys, these ups and downs that captivate us. So what if you'd picture that successful version of yourself in the future and invest in sharing those stories of growth? If we look at those renowned online entrepreneurs as an example, it's their tales of 3 a.m. work nights that truly engage us, isn't it? And if you're thinking, but who would want to work with someone like me at my stage? Then this is the moment to gain some perspective. Regardless where you are in your journey, there will always be someone who can benefit from your experience and be inspired by your story. After all, people aren't just seeking for solutions. They're seeking for someone genuine, someone they can trust. And next up is connect to your audience.
Okay, so I'm posting on social media every day, but I'm kind of posting into a void. At least it feels like it. So my question is, how can I better connect to folks online?
And so the real question is, why do we feel drawn to certain people or brands? Well, it's because we associate them with a certain narrative in our heads. There's one quote by one of my favorite authors. His name is Eduardo Galeano, and it says, "Scientists say we're made of atoms, but a little bird told me that we're also made of stories." And so if humans use stories to create meaning, what do you think will happen when your client has to choose between you or one of your competitors? They will choose the one with the better story. Now, of course, better is always subjective. Your story might mean one thing to one person and another thing to another person. So it's not about only making it stand out, it's about making it resonate. It's about meeting your audience somewhere. Stories are always about creating a shared space. Otherwise, what's the point? And the way we get there is by owning our strength, but also our weaknesses. Which brings me to our last tip. Overcome perfectionism. Now, most of us, and I think that this is also very human, we want to share stories that make us look like these perfectly engineered machines. No one ever got fired, no one ever got heartbroken, no one ever got a divorce, and if I got one, here's a picture of me with my new hot partner, right? And the thing is that deep down, we all know that we are no perfectly engineered machines. And if you come to tell me that you are, then this is kind of a problem because I have no idea if I can trust you. I have no idea if I can trust you with my team, with my design project, with my business. How will you deal with challenges? Are you going to dance them out? Are you going to yoga them away or meditate on it in Bali? I don't know, because everything that you're telling me about yourself is curated. No shared space here. So what makes your story better, more interesting, more relatable? That's what I want to know. So if we were to workshop this out, you'd have to take that current version of your story, and I'd ask you, how did you get here? And that's the fastest way to get to the real stuff. All those rough patches, the climb, all that stuff matters. But you don't want to overshare. And that's a good point, because there can be an overdose to this. It's like you've suddenly taken the vulnerability pill. For some people, it does become addictive. And the reason for that is that emotional stories click. If you come to think about how our news system changed over time, you know what I mean. You can get a whole lot of engagement on an emotional story, but likes don't necessarily translate to conversions. So there might be a lot of people who like or engage with your story, but they can't necessarily afford your offer. So this is not about making your brand like a therapy session. There is a process to sharing vulnerable stories. And it really boils down to being relevant. How is that thing that I learned in that dark moment relevant to my audience? How can I serve them with the story that I'm about to tell them? Where can they jump in and say, I feel exactly the same? These are the spots that you want to find. So, as you can see, there's more to this than social media or creating the right website. You actually become an experience. And we become experiences by sharing our story. Remember, we're all made of stories.
Yeah.
So, reflect on yours, find the right blend, and whenever someone can relate to your journey, that's when you made a real connection. All right, guys, that's a wrap on 10 actionable tips to build a powerful personal brand. If you're ready for more, you might want to hit the subscribe button or check out this playlist right here. Till then, I'll catch you guys next time. Take care. Bye.